never end. And as we get to the very end of Sam Amick and Anthony Slater's article, this was something that caught my eye and something that has already caught the eyes of some fans out here because it's not good. This is not good. So essentially, Sam Amick ends the article, which is it's mostly about De'Aaron Fox, of course, but again, a lot about the organization. So, like I said, go check out the full thing. It's great work. These guys work their tails off, both Anthony Slater and Sam Amick. But I do want to break this down because I know a lot of you are running around. And, you know, like I said, this is more of an informational type show today as there's a lot of stuff to break down. People want to look ahead, so let's do it. This is from the article. Quote, Domantas Sabonis is expected to ask for clarity from the organization on his role this offseason. He has questions similar to the ones De'Aaron Fox had last summer. It could be headed towards chaos, all right? League sources said Sabonis, who has 3 more seasons and a combined $140.3 million left on his current deal, is expected to seek clarity about the organization's plan in the offseason. Just as Fox wanted to know whose voice mattered most on key decisions and who the team's owner might be trusting the most as counsel, Sabonis is known to have similar questions. Even with the recent success, league sources said several members of the team's core are watching and wondering where all this is headed. What's the vision here? One league source close to a core Kings player said, it feels like it could be headed towards chaos. And that's at the very end of the article. After you get through all this, and you could maybe allude to, okay, Doug Christie and Domantas Sabonis, they have this background. Maybe you could surmise that they picked Doug Christie and Domantas Sabonis from player to player, picked Domantas Sabonis in a way over De'Aaron Fox in an indirect way. All right, let's move on. Let's rock and roll. And then you get to the end of the article, and you say, oh, here. So now, even Domantas Sabonis, even with his former personal coach, now head coach, he's got questions. So even if they didn't agree, and I'm not saying that's who the person was, but, you know, maybe it was, if it was, on who the head coach should be, and you get someone who you believe to be the head coach. I talked to someone before the show. They said, yeah, the head coach situation is figured out, but Alan, maybe that's not enough. You ever in a relationship? And you know, I love my relationship comparisons. Maybe love ain't enough, right? Do you make enough money? Are you comfortable? Do you have the same views on religion and politics and kids? Maybe love ain't enough. Maybe having your head coach or a head coach you like, maybe that's not enough. He wants to know, what's the vision? League sources said Sabonis, who has 3 more seasons and a combined $140.3 million left on his current deal, is expected to seek clarity about the organization's plan in the offseason. That is crazy to me. And maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe this is just a part of the deal. Hey, I love Doug. Depending on, and honestly, some of this is how the season ends. If they sneak into the 7 seed or 8 seed and it's a pretty entertaining first round, that conversation maybe doesn't look the same. Hey, I feel like we're headed in the right direction. We get a point guard. We get who we need. You know, we might lose Jake. We still got Valanciunas. Boom, boom, boom. We're good to go. And maybe this whole thing is a bit blown out of proportion. But if you get that 9 seed, you win the first game, you lose to the Timberwolves, you lose to the Clippers, whoever it is, you miss the playoffs, could that conversation end differently? Now, I will say, I just off the top of my head, my belief is that Domantas Sabonis would go into this conversation in a different headspace than De'Aaron. That's not to say that, and let's not forget, De'Aaron had a conversation with the Kings in the summer where he told them, "Hey, I'm not going to play for another coach here. I'll be playing for another team if you move Mike Brown." And then they had the meeting in the winter where things just didn't look like it was going in the right direction. That's still kind of the one thing that we haven't gotten that much clarity on, that conversation, by the way, which is interesting, specifically what was said, and we probably never will, or maybe eventually. But essentially now we have Domantas Sabonis having whatever version of the same conversation De'Aaron had in the summer, right? Where he says, hey, where are we going? What's going on? And hopefully he doesn't say, if it ain't Doug, it's possible. If it ain't Doug, then move me too. I don't see that happening. But a lot of this, I believe, is based on how the season ends. So some people are kind of freaking out. I mean, could be headed towards chaos. That is insanity. Insanity.
So a big theme of Sam's story, I'll throw Anthony Slater. Sam and Anthony Slater's story is different voices having influence over the organization, other than the people in charge, i.e. general manager and head coach.
Yes, and you can read the article to see who gets brought up. We are not going to do it here.
I mean, we can say the names. He mentions Bettina, who's the COO, John Reinhardt. He mentions his daughter, Angelique.
Yes.
A certain person who may be dating his daughter, potentially. There's a lot of people who get brought up, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about who's in charge. And everyone is looking for answers, it would appear. But I think what's most interesting about this nugget is the person who you most need to make sure has a sense of clarity is your franchise player.
Right.
Like, everyone wants answers, but you have to make sure that your franchise player, who you moved on from De'Aaron Fox to now essentially build around this guy, you've got to make sure Domantas Sabonis has the answers, because, like it or not, at this point, he is the franchise. They've made personnel decisions to accommodate.
It's not just him, though. I mean, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but Zach LaVine is not going anywhere, I don't think. Not for now, not for the next couple years until his player option.
Not at the price tag that he's making.
No, that's what I'm saying. So it's a combination of both of them. One in choosing, one in kind of by default.
Yeah, but like Domantas Sabonis has been the player they moved off of Tyrese Halliburton for, the centerpiece of the Beam team. As good of a player as Zach LaVine is, and I don't want to shade Zach LaVine at all, he's an all-star. Domantas Sabonis is an all-NBA center, probably the best player the Sacramento Kings have had since Boogie Cousins, and possibly even before that.
Right.
So that's the person you have to make sure knows what direction you're going. And I think you mentioned the is love enough and is this or that. I think it starts with who's actually in charge here. And when we get to the offseason, that might be a completely different answer than right now.
Right.
Doug's an interim head coach. If you read the Sam story, it doesn't seem like Monty McNair's on the greatest footing right now. And they've got to answer some questions about what direction we are now going, even if we know who the players are very likely going to be. Yeah,
so for me, I think there's just so many questions that Domantas Sabonis could have, because to that point, if it is a situation where they're going to move on from Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox and the crew, then that's Domantas Sabonis saying, okay, so we're getting a new GM. What's the vision here? What is going to be their approach? What are you looking for in a GM? So I'm not worried about Domantas Sabonis, because number one, he's on contract, right? So I'm not worried about him in the same way I was worried about De'Aaron. I think it just comes down to, are his questions going to be answered in a way that is sufficient for him? And some of that is, if Domantas Sabonis, and again, it also depends how much going to the first round matters. If I'm just assuming that the first round solves all, right? It's like if you're a mid-major with March Madness coming around, all you want to do is get into the tournament, and that solves all. You don't have dreams. You have dreams of going to the Sweet 16 and Final Four, things like that, but just get into the tournament. If you're Iona, just get into the tournament, and you'll have a great time.
We'll take a series against OKC.
Yes. If you're VCU, everything is great, and your whole school is happy about that. That's how I feel about it, but maybe clearly De'Aaron, because they were in position to do that. That wasn't enough for De'Aaron. I'm assuming that's enough right now to build on for Sabonis when he doesn't have the same contract situation. But Sabonis could say, I don't really care about getting our butts whooped by OKC. I'm trying to actually do something. I'm very similar to De'Aaron in that way. That's what we don't know yet. If there's still question marks after, because if they make the playoffs, I don't know how they fire Monty. I don't. Mm-hmm. I don't. So is Domantas Sabonis okay with that? Is that enough?
And the two of them are in different stages of their career, right? Mm-hmm. I think for De'Aaron, it was the lack of direction, or, as he called it, like a vision or organizational stability, was not enough for him to commit 5 more years to the organization. Right. With Sabonis, it's different because he signed the max extension when he could have gone anywhere. Mm-hmm. And they knew that it was headed to a max extension after the Beam Team season and all that stuff. But it's a little different because Sabonis is about to turn 29. He'll be a free agent again when he's 32.
Right.
If you want to make the argument De'Aaron Fox is entering his prime at year 9, I think I would say maybe not, but you could make that argument. With Sabonis, he's headed into year 10 and 11 and 12 with the Sacramento Kings. This is kind of his last window to win a quote-unquote championship or be a number 1 on a championship contender. And I don't know if that's exactly the most important thing for Domantas Sabonis. Again, none of us know what Domantas Sabonis wants, but it's important to consider when you're talking about an organizational direction where we've talked before. Once you get to 2026, all cards are on the table because Keon's a free agent. Right. DeRozan's a free agent. Levine can opt out of $50 million if he so chooses. Keegan's not going to be on the rookie contract anymore. So after next season, everything's on the table. And so I think that's important to start having that conversation now, because if they don't have a clear direction, that might just accelerate that timeline, just like we saw with De'Aaron Fox.
Let's hear from the man himself. De'Aaron Fox had some things to say. And don't worry, we are headed towards our King Spurs preview and also pocket watching, right? There's some, whether De'Aaron is happy or not, there is a lot of things that the Kings need to take care of to get to the playoffs. And then we can have that conversation. Back to your calls as well.